She was simply another passenger in seat 8A trying to sleep. Then the captain's voice shattered the silence. If there's a combat pilot on board, identify yourself immediately. 300 passengers froze. Because the woman in the green sweater wasn't who anyone thought she was. Before watching the full story, comment below where you're watching from. Also like and subscribe for more stories. Picture this. You're on a plane 35,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean. The hum of the engines, the dim cabin lights, passengers sleeping or watching movies. Just another routine flight from New York to London. Nothing unusual, nothing to worry about. Then suddenly, a voice crackles through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. If there is a combat pilot on board, please identify yourself immediately. The cabin falls silent. Forks freeze midair. People look at each other with wide eyes. A combat pilot on a commercial flight? What kind of emergency requires a combat pilot? And in seat 8A, a woman in a green sweater stirs from her sleep, completely unaware that her carefully hidden past is about to be exposed in front of 300 strangers. This isn't fiction. This is the story of Captain Mara Dalton, and how one transatlantic flight turned into the most intense hours of her life. If you're watching this, make sure you stay until the end, because what happens in this cockpit will leave you speechless. Her name was Mara Dalton, but nobody on that plane knew who she really was. To the businessman in 8B, she was just another tired passenger. To the flight attendants, she was the quiet woman who politely declined the meal service and asked for just water and a blanket. To everyone else, she was invisible. And that's exactly how Mara wanted it. She had chosen the window seat on purpose, chosen the overnight flight on purpose, chosen anonymity on purpose. For the first time in months, she wasn't Captain Dalton. She wasn't a woman who had flown fighter jets in combat zones. She wasn't the decorated pilot with classified missions in her file. She was just Mara, exhausted, trying to sleep, trying to forget. The green sweater she wore still smelled like her mother's house, where she had spent the last 2 weeks trying to feel normal again, trying to convince herself that she had made the right choice by walking away from military service, trying to silence the nightmares that woke her up at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat with the sound of alarms blaring in her ears. Mara pressed her forehead against the cool window and watched the dark Atlantic below. Somewhere down there, cargo ships moved like tiny dots of light. Somewhere up here, she was supposed to find peace. Her eyes grew heavy. The drone of the engines became a lullaby. Finally, after weeks of insomnia, sleep found her. She had no idea it wouldn't last long. It started 90 minutes into the flight. Mara was deep in sleep, the kind of dreamless rest her body desperately needed, when something changed in the cabin. The energy shifted. People stopped talking. The steady hum of normal flight routine was interrupted by a crackle on the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. The voice was different from the cheerful welcome announcement at takeoff. This voice was tight, controlled, the kind of voice that's trying very hard not to show panic. We are experiencing a technical situation that requires immediate assistance. If there is anyone on board with combat pilot experience, please make yourself known to the flight crew immediately. Silence, then whispers, then nervous laughter from a few passengers who thought it must be some kind of joke. But the flight attendants' faces told a different story. They moved quickly through the aisles, their trained smiles replaced with barely concealed worry. A woman in 12C grabbed her husband's arm. A combat pilot? Why would they need a combat pilot on a commercial plane? The businessman in 8B stopped typing on his laptop. A teenager pulled out her earbuds. Parents held their children a little tighter. And in seat 8A, Mara woke up. At first she thought she was dreaming. The announcement echoed in her half-conscious mind like a memory from her old life. But then she opened her eyes and saw the flight attendant standing in the aisle, her eyes scanning the passengers with growing desperation. Mara's heart sank. She knew that look. She had seen it before on the faces of soldiers who needed help and didn't know where to find it. The flight attendant moved closer, leaning down to the elderly man in 8C. "Sir, do you know if anyone in this section has military experience?" The man shook his head, confused. Mara closed her eyes again. This wasn't her problem. She had left that life behind. She had promised herself that she was done being the person everyone turned to in a crisis. She was done with the responsibility, done with the weight of other people's lives on her shoulders. She could stay quiet, keep her head down, let someone else step up. But then she heard the flight attendant's voice again, this time closer. "Ma'am." Mara opened her eyes. The flight attendant was looking directly at her, and something in the woman's expression made Mara's training kick in. Years of reading body language, of assessing threats, of making split-second decisions. This wasn't a drill. This was real. "Ma'am, the captain is asking if there's anyone on board with combat pilot experience. Do you know of anyone?" Mara looked past the flight attendant and saw the faces of other passengers. A mother holding a baby. An elderly couple clutching hands. A young man who looked like he was on his way to his first job interview in London. All of them afraid. And in that moment Mara realized something. She could walk away from the military. She could change her clothes, hide her past, and try to be normal. But she couldn't walk away from who she fundamentally was. She took a breath. "I'm a pilot," she said quietly. The flight attendant leaned closer. "I'm sorry." Mara spoke louder this time, her voice carrying the authority she thought she had buried. "I'm a combat pilot. United States Air Force. I flew F-16s. The cabin erupted in whispers. Heads turned. The businessman in 8B stared at her like she had just revealed she was a secret agent. The elderly man in 8C grabbed her arm and said, "Thank God." The flight attendant's face flooded with relief. "Please come with me immediately." Mara unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. Every eye in that section of the plane watched her walk toward the front of the aircraft. Her green sweater, her tired face, her ordinary appearance suddenly seemed like a disguise that had been ripped away. She wasn't just Mara anymore. She was Captain Dalton, and she was about to find out why a transatlantic flight needed a combat pilot. The cockpit door opened, and Mara stepped into a world she thought she'd left behind. The captain and first officer were both in their seats, but their body language screamed trouble. The captain's knuckles were white on the controls. The first officer was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. And the dashboard in front of them looked like a Christmas tree of warning lights. Red, yellow, flashing, beeping. The captain glanced back at her, and Mara saw something in his eyes she recognized immediately. The look of someone who was out of their depth and knew it. "You're the combat pilot?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Captain Mara Dalton, U.S. Air Force, retired." She moved closer to get a better look at the instruments. "What's the situation?" The captain exhaled sharply. "We've lost partial control of our flight systems. Autopilot failed 20 minutes ago. We're on manual now, but that's not the worst part." He pointed to the radar screen. Mara's blood ran cold. There was another aircraft on the screen. Close. Too close. Flying in formation with them in a way that no commercial pilot would ever attempt. "How long has it been there?" Mara asked. 15 minutes. It appeared out of nowhere. No transponder signal, no radio contact. It's been shadowing us, matching our speed, our altitude. Every time we try to change course, it adjusts with us. Mara studied the radar. The blip was positioned just off their right wing, in what military pilots would call an aggressive intercept position. This wasn't some lost private plane. This was deliberate. "Have you contacted air traffic control?" she asked. "Yes. They don't have it on their radar. They think it's a system malfunction on our end." The captain's voice cracked slightly. "But I can see it. We can all see it. It's real." The first officer spoke up, his voice shaky. "There's something else. Our navigation system started receiving coordinates we didn't input. Someone's trying to override our flight path." Mara felt her training take over. That cold calm that came from years of dealing with crisis situations. "Show me." The first officer pulled up the navigation display. Sure enough, there was a new flight path programmed into the system. One that would take them far off their scheduled route, over a remote section of the Atlantic where radar coverage was sparse. "Who has access to override your systems remotely?" Mara asked. No one should, the captain said. Our systems are supposed to be secure. Mara's mind raced through possibilities. Military aircraft, government agencies, or something worse. I need to see outside, she said. Can you adjust the exterior cameras? The captain nodded and switched on the camera feed. The screen flickered to life, showing the dark sky and the vast emptiness of the Atlantic below. And there, off the right wing, was the other aircraft. It was unlike anything Mara had seen in commercial aviation. Sleek, dark, with no visible markings or identification. The kind of plane that was designed not to be seen, not to be tracked. That's not a commercial aircraft, Mara said quietly. And it's definitely not friendly. The radio crackled to life with a burst of static, and then a voice came through, cold, distorted, speaking in English but with an accent Mara couldn't quite place. Flight 417, you are off course. Adjust to the coordinates transmitted to your system. The captain looked at Mara in horror. They're communicating directly with us. Mara grabbed the radio microphone. Years of military protocol kicked in. This is a civilian aircraft on a scheduled transatlantic route. Identify yourself and state your intentions. There was a pause. Then the voice came back. Flight 417. Comply or face consequences. The unknown aircraft suddenly banked closer, cutting across their path in a maneuver that made the entire plane shudder. Gasps and screams echoed from the cabin behind them. They're trying to force us off course, Mara said. Her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. They want us to follow their flight path to that remote location. What do we do? The first officer asked, his hands shaking on the controls. Mara looked at the instruments, calculating distances, speeds, options. In her mind, she was back in the cockpit of an F-16, facing down hostile aircraft over foreign territory. The training never left you. The instincts never died. We don't comply, she said firmly. And we don't let them intimidate us. Captain, do you have full manual control? Yes, but I'm a commercial pilot. I don't know how to handle aggressive aircraft. I do, Mara said. With your permission, I'd like to take the co-pilot seat. The captain nodded immediately. Anything. Just help us. The first officer slid out of his chair, still pale and sweating. Mara took his place, her hands finding the controls like they were old friends. The yoke felt different from a fighter jet stick, but the principles were the same. Physics didn't change just because you were flying a Boeing instead of an F-16. She scanned the instruments again, noting their fuel levels, their altitude, their speed. Then she looked at the radar screen and the position of the hostile aircraft. Okay, she said quietly. Here's what we're going to do. They expect us to panic. They expect us to either comply or try to run. We're going to do neither. What's the third option? The captain asked. Mara's jaw set in determination. We're going to outmaneuver them. What happened next would be talked about in aviation circles for years to come. Mara took control of the aircraft with a steady hand and a clear mind. The hostile plane continued to shadow them, occasionally making aggressive passes that sent passengers in the cabin into panic. But Mara had seen this tactic before. It was intimidation, pure and simple. They're testing us, she explained to the captain, seeing how we react. Every time we flinch, they get bolder. The radio crackled again. Flight 417, you have 1 minute to comply. Adjust course now. Mara didn't respond. Instead, she watched the radar, tracking the hostile aircraft's movements. It was flying in a predictable pattern. Aggressive passes followed by repositioning. Whoever was piloting it was skilled, but they were also following a playbook. And Mara knew that playbook. They're going to make another pass in about 30 seconds, she said. When they do, I'm going to adjust our altitude and speed in a way they won't expect. Hold on. The captain gripped his armrest. This is a commercial aircraft with 300 passengers. We can't do combat maneuvers. We're not doing combat maneuvers, Mara said calmly. We're doing evasive flying. There's a difference. Trust me. On the radar, the hostile aircraft began its approach. Mara watched it get closer, waiting for the exact right moment. Now, she said, and pushed the controls forward. The plane descended rapidly. A controlled drop that sent loose items flying in the cabin and made passengers scream. But it was calculated, precise. The hostile aircraft, expecting them to stay level or climb, shot past them, overshooting its intercept point. Mara immediately pulled up and adjusted their heading, putting distance between them and their pursuer. That bought us maybe 2 minutes, she said. But they'll recover and come back. What's the endgame here? The captain asked. We can't outrun them. We don't have weapons. We're a sitting duck. Mara's mind worked through scenarios. He was right. In a prolonged engagement, a commercial aircraft couldn't win against a military-grade plane. But they didn't need to win. They just needed to survive long enough to get help. Do we have communication with any military channels? She asked. No, we're on civilian frequencies only. Then we need to get someone's attention. Somewhere there are satellites watching this airspace. Somewhere there are military early warning systems. We need to make ourselves visible. She adjusted their transponder settings, switching on every identification system the plane had. That's going to alert air traffic control that something's wrong, the captain said. That's exactly what I want, Mara replied. Just as Mara was calculating their next move, the cockpit intercom buzzed with urgent energy. Cockpit, this is Julia in the back. The head flight attendant's voice was tense. We have a situation. 2 passengers in business class are acting strangely. They keep trying to access the service compartment, and one of them just said something about needing to complete the mission. The other passengers near them are getting scared. Mara's blood turned to ice. This wasn't just an external threat. There were people on board working with whoever was flying that hostile aircraft. Do not let them access any compartments, Mara said into the intercom. Keep them in their seats. Use force if necessary. This is a security situation. She switched off the intercom and looked at the captain. This is coordinated. The aircraft outside, the passengers inside. Someone planned this carefully. But why? The captain asked. What do they want? Mara thought about the forced flight path, the remote coordinates, the timing of everything. They want this plane. Or they want something on this plane. Or, she paused, a terrible thought forming. Or they want someone on this plane. The realization hit her like a physical blow. What if this wasn't random? What if she was the target? Mara had enemies. During her time in the Air Force, she had flown missions that disrupted operations, took out targets, made powerful people very angry. She had walked away from service because her last mission had gone wrong, ended badly, cost lives. She had thought that by retiring, by disappearing into civilian life, she could escape that world. But maybe that world hadn't let her go. Captain, she said slowly, I need to ask you something. Was there anything unusual about the passenger manifest for this flight? Any last-minute bookings? Any flags in security screening? The captain shook his head. Not that I was informed of. Why? Before Mara could answer, the hostile aircraft made another aggressive pass. This time so close that the turbulence rocked the entire plane. Warning alarms blared. The captain struggled to keep control. Mara grabbed the yoke and helped him stabilize. They're getting desperate, she said. Which means we're running out of time. In the cabin, things were escalating. The 2 suspicious passengers had become openly hostile. Other passengers had moved away from them, pressing themselves into the aisles. The flight attendants had formed a human barrier, but everyone could sense the violence about to break loose. One of the men stood up, his jacket falling open just enough for people to see what looked like a weapon tucked into his waistband. Everyone stay calm, he said in a flat voice. We don't want to hurt anyone, but this plane is changing course. A woman screamed. A child started crying. But then something unexpected happened. From seat 24D, a large man in a business suit stood up. I don't think so, he said quietly. The suspicious passenger turned, his hand moving toward his jacket, but the businessman was faster. In one smooth motion, he covered the distance between them and tackled the man to the ground. The weapon skittered across the floor. Chaos erupted. The The second suspicious passenger tried to run toward the cockpit, but passengers blocked his way. A retired police officer and 18B grabbed him. Within seconds, both threats were neutralized by ordinary people who refused to be victims. In the cockpit, Mara heard the commotion through the door. "They've got them," the captain said, listening to updates from the cabin crew. "The passengers subdued them." Mara felt a surge of pride. In a crisis, people showed their true character. These weren't trained soldiers. They were regular people, businessmen, tourists, families, who had found courage when it mattered most. But the threat outside remained. The hostile aircraft was still there, circling, waiting. And then the radio crackled again, but this time the voice was different. Not distorted. Clear. Speaking with an accent Mara suddenly recognized. "Captain Dalton," the voice said. "I know you're on that plane. I know you're in that cockpit. This ends when you comply." The captain stared at her. "They know your name." Mara closed her eyes briefly. "I know that voice," she said quietly. "His name is Victor Klav. I faced him in a combat situation 3 years ago. My squadron intercepted his team over a disputed zone. We won. His brother didn't make it." "This is personal," the captain whispered. "Yes," Mara said. "He's been hunting me. And I led him right to 300 innocent people." The guilt threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed it down. There would be time for guilt later. Right now she had to think. "Victor," she said into the radio, using his name deliberately. "You want me? Fine. But these people have nothing to do with our past. Let them go." Victor's laugh came through the speakers. "You think I'm here for revenge? No, Captain. I'm here to prove a point. You took everything from me. Now I'm taking everything from you." Mara's mind worked through the possibilities at lightning speed. Victor had the advantage. He had a military aircraft, weapons, and position. But he also had limitations. This was international airspace, heavily monitored. Every minute they stayed in the air increased the chance of military intervention. He had a window of opportunity, and it was closing, which meant he was going to make his move soon. "Captain," Mara said, "I need you to listen carefully. In about 3 minutes, help is going to arrive. I've been broadcasting our position and situation on every frequency available. Somewhere, someone is scrambling jets to intercept. Victor knows this too. So what's he going to do? He's going to try to force us down before help arrives. He'll have to make a choice. Either shoot us down and kill everyone, or force us to land where he wants us. Which do you think he'll choose?" Mara thought about Victor, about the man she had encountered years ago. He was ruthless but not mindless. He wanted to hurt her, yes, but he also wanted her to know she had been beaten. Shooting them down would be too quick, too impersonal. "He'll force us down," she said. "Which means we have one chance to turn this around." She explained her plan quickly. It was risky. It required perfect timing and a level of flying precision that pushed the limits of what a commercial aircraft could do. The captain listened, his face growing paler with each word. "That's insane," he said when she finished. "Yes," Mara agreed. "But it's the only way." On the radar, Victor's aircraft was repositioning for what would clearly be a final aggressive maneuver. This was it, the endgame. Mara's hands found the controls, muscle memory taking over. In her mind, she wasn't in a Boeing cockpit anymore. She was back in the F-16, where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. "Here he comes," the captain said, watching the radar. Victor's aircraft accelerated, cutting toward them at an angle designed to force them into a dive. A classic intercept maneuver. But Mara was ready. At the last possible second, she did something no commercial pilot would ever attempt. She cut the engines back, deployed speed brakes, and let the plane drop like a stone. Victor's aircraft shot past them, missing by hundreds of feet. The plane shuddered violently. Passengers screamed. Warning alarms filled the cockpit. And then Mara fired the engines back to full power and pulled up hard. The G-forces pushed everyone back into their seats. The plane groaned under the stress, but it held. They came up right behind Victor's aircraft. in a position where he couldn't maneuver without risking collision. For 3 seconds, Mara had turned a commercial plane into a fighter jet, putting the hunter in the crosshairs. Victor's voice came over the radio, filled with surprise and anger. "Impossible. You forgot who you were dealing with," Mara said calmly. And then on the horizon, she saw the most beautiful sight in the world. 2 fighter jets appearing like angels from the dawn sky. Military interceptors scrambled from a base in Iceland, finally responding to their distress calls. Victor saw them too. His aircraft banked sharply, breaking off the engagement. Within seconds he was gone, disappearing into the clouds like a ghost, unwilling to face actual military opposition. The fighter jets took up escort positions on either side of the commercial plane. The lead pilot's voice came over the radio, clear and professional. "Flight 417. This is Lieutenant Collins of the United States Air Force. We've got you. You're safe now. Proceed to your original heading. We'll escort you to London." In the cockpit, the captain let out a breath he'd been holding for what felt like hours. His hands were shaking as he took back control of the plane. "You saved us," he said to Mara, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved all of us." Mara didn't respond immediately. She was watching the fighter jets outside, thinking about the life she had tried to leave behind and how it had found her anyway. 3 hours later, Flight 417 touched down at London Heathrow. Emergency vehicles lined the runway. Security personnel swarmed the plane as soon as it came to a stop. The 2 hostile passengers were taken into custody immediately. Statements were taken from crew and witnesses. And in the middle of it all was Mara, still wearing her green sweater, still looking like an ordinary passenger who had just happened to save everyone's lives. The passengers wanted to thank her. They lined up, shaking her hand, hugging her, some crying with relief. The mother with the baby held her child up to Mara and said, "You gave her a future." The businessman from 8B, who had helped subdue the hostile passengers, clapped her on the shoulder. "You're a hero," he said simply. But Mara didn't feel like a hero. She felt tired. She felt exposed. She felt like the life she had tried to build was now gone, shattered by 3 hours over the Atlantic. Airport security wanted to question her. So did intelligence agencies. So did the media, who had somehow already gotten wind of the dramatic flight and were waiting outside the terminal. But before any of that, Mara found a quiet corner and pulled out her phone. She had one call to make. Her former commanding officer answered on the second ring. "Dalton. I heard. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sir," she said. "But Victor Clav is still out there. And now he knows for certain I survived. He'll come again." There was a long pause. "So what are you saying?" Mara looked at her reflection in a nearby window. At the woman in the green sweater, who wasn't really just Mara anymore, who had never really been just Mara. "I'm saying I'm done running," she said quietly. "I tried the civilian life. I tried to disappear. But today proved something to me. I can't escape who I am, and maybe I shouldn't try." "Are you saying you want to come back?" Mara thought about the 300 people on that plane. The strangers who had looked at her with hope. The child who now had a future because Mara had been in seat 8A at exactly the right moment. "Yes, sir," she said. "I want to come back. Because there are more victors out there, and someone has to stop them." "Welcome home, Captain Dalton." 6 months later, Mara was back in uniform, but not the same uniform. This time she was part of a specialized unit that dealt with exactly the kind of threat she had faced that day. Rogue operatives, international incidents, the gray areas where military and civilian worlds collided. She flew again. Not combat missions but protective ones. Escort duty, emergency response. The kind of flying that saved lives instead of taking them. And sometimes late at night she thought about Flight 417. About the passengers who had become heroes in their own right. About the captain who had trusted her with 300 lives. About the woman she had been in that green sweater, trying so hard to be someone she wasn't. That day had taught her something important. You can try to hide from your past. You can change your clothes, change your location, change your entire life. But when crisis comes, when people need you, who you really are will always rise to the surface. And for Captain Mara Dalton, that was someone who flew toward danger, not away from it. Someone who, when the call came at 35,000 feet, didn't hesitate to answer. Because that's what heroes do. Even when they're just trying to sleep in seat 8A. Based on the incredible true story of courage at altitude, this account reminds us that ordinary moments can become extraordinary, and that the person sitting next to you might be exactly who you need them to be when everything goes wrong.